Hello, this is the Debate Nebraska video for an introduction to weighing in debate. So in this video, we'll talk about the applications of weighing, what is weighing, how it's used in debate, why it's good, etc. So what is weighing? Weighing is essentially a comparative analysis in debate between two different arguments. Specifically, it is used to prioritize different impacts most of the time. And most importantly, it's a form of judge instruction that tells the judge, or informs the judge rather, which argument or which impact they ought to prioritize. Because when you're given, like, let's say, a variety of impacts within the debate round, you've made some arguments as to impacts that you have, and your opponent makes some arguments as to the impacts that they have. You want to give reasons as to why your impacts matter more and sort of outweigh your opponent's impacts, which is what the purpose of weighing does. It's to distinguish between two different impacts as to why one impact matters more than another. So the way people usually weigh in debate is through these are five of the most common metrics by which people weigh between different impacts. So you're going to use these five in determining why an impact outweighs another impact. So the first one we have here is magnitude, which is basically the severity of an impact. So for instance, death is probably the most severe impact, or is much higher in terms of magnitude for an impact, while getting a paper cut, for instance, would be lower on the magnitude scale because it's less severe when compared to things like death. Next is scope, which is basically how wide the impact reaches. You can think of it that way, how many people that impact sort of influences. So for instance, getting a paper cut might be a very common, like, universal experience, but dying might be less of an experience in comparison to that. Or a better example could be getting the cold, right? A lot of people get the cold. It's an impact that is very wide in terms of scope versus sort of let's say getting into a car accident, for instance, might be less common than getting the common cold. And the next common weighing standard would be probability. So probability is basically what it sounds like. It's just its name. It's just how probable an impact is. So for instance, getting a paper cut versus like an asteroid strike on Earth. Obviously, like, we get paper cuts on like a much more common basis, and it's much more probable to get a paper cut than compared to like an asteroid hitting Earth, right? An asteroid hitting Earth would be very like improbable, which means that it would be less in terms of probability in that weighing metric. So that's just a way to determine which impact matters more based on the probability of it happening. The next weighing standard is time frame. So this is the argument on how soon an impact will happen. So for instance, you can argue climate change is an impact that outweighs a lot of other impacts on time frame, because climate change is sort of happening right now. It's going to happen very soon. We have to do something to fix it, or else it'll be too late, right? Like all these arguments as to why climate change is a very important impact because of how soon it will occur and how soon we have to act before it'll be too late. Versus something like again, an asteroid impact, right? That's going to happen very far off in the future. It's not going to happen anytime soon. It's not really immediate at all, which means it should concern us less than compared to climate change. The last impact here is reversibility, which is basically how reversible is an impact. So two impacts we can look at are getting like disease versus a nuclear war, right? So disease, like if someone like catches a cold or something, that's reversible. You can always you can get better, right? There's a good chance that you will recover after like getting the common cold. But compare that to a nuclear war where it sort of kills you and you're like it guarantees death, like everyone's gonna die, etc. It's an apocalypse. It causes human extinction. That is irreversible in of itself. It's just an irreversible impact, which means that the argument here, if you're weighing under reversibility, would be that we should prioritize a nuclear war because it is irreversible. We cannot go back to the status quo if a nuclear war happens, but we can always like recover or something after someone catches a cold, right? So these are the five most common weighing metrics as to what you'll find in debate, and it's good to make multiple weighing standards, but it's always good to prioritize on one of them and give reasons as to why that weighing standard is most important, which is what we're going on to next, which is meta weighing. So meta-weighing is weighing between different weighing standards. So going back, these 5 standards of magnitude, scope, probability, time frame, reversibility, what you're doing with meta-weighing is you're weighing between those different weighing standards. So why should we use magnitude to weigh impacts versus probability? And this it uplayers normal weighing because it's a question of which weighing standard we ought to use, which is a reason why you should use meta weighing. You should use meta weighing because one, it allows you to really focus and develop one weighing standard, and basically if you win that weighing standard is the best weighing standard as to determine which impacts we should prioritize, then it's really easy just to dump on it and just win that. And it requires less work in comparison to just making a ton of arguments under multiple weighing standards and sort of figuring out which one your opponent has and trying to outweigh them under that standard. And so it's a lot easier just to go for one the truest weighing standard and just give reasons as to why that weighing standard outweighs other weighing standards. So an example here could be time frame outweighs magnitude, for instance, because time frame, we have to focus on impacts that will occur very, very soon, right? There's no point in preparing for an asteroid strike because it's going to happen very, very far off in the future. But we should do things like prioritize reducing poverty, for instance, because poverty is happening right now. It outweighs on time frame, and we should use time frame analysis because we should solve impacts that are occurring very soon, or that are occurring even right now, rather than focusing on impacts that'll occur very further down the line. So so just giving reasons as to why your weighing standard is better than other weighing standards is really good, because it allows you to win debates easier, because if you're just able to win one weighing standard, then that's sufficient to just win the debate. So here's an example for just normal weighing. We'll take climate change versus economic decline, and we'll argue why climate change outweighs economic decline. So first, the magnitude. You can argue that climate change causes death, right? It causes environmental destruction. That's a very severe impact that outweighs economic decline, which is more of arguably a more abstract consequence. It doesn't really result in physical destruction of the environment or of human life that climate change causes. So you can also use scope in this example. So climate change impacts everyone, not only humans, but also it impacts wildlife, etc., and vegetation, plants, all these other forms of life that outweigh on scope, because it's a much broader impact, because it impacts the entire world, right? Because climate change occurs on a global level. You can also give a reason as to why climate change outweighs on probability. So based on the current trajectory we are going now, if we don't do anything, we're sort of on the path towards destruction, which means that climate change is a very, very probable impact, because scientists have figured out that we're sort of on the path towards no return in terms of global warming, environmental destruction, all these issues right now, which means that climate change is a very, very probable impact, which means that it outweighs economic decline. And we can also use time frame. So an argument under time frame would be climate change. So similar to the arguments we made under probability, it would be that climate change is going to happen very, very soon, or is happening right now, right? So climate change, we're on this path, it's going to happen soon. We have to deal with it now before it's too late, which means that climate change would outweigh economic decline on time frame, right? You can argue that economic decline will not occur until a while, we won't see another economic collapse until much later in the future, but climate change is happening really, really soon, which means that it outweighs on time frame. And the final example we have here is reversibility. So climate change, it causes destruction of wildlife, it causes destruction of the environment. That's all irreversible, because once something dies, we can't just revitalize it. It's dead forever, which means that this would outweigh economic decline, right? The economy can always fluctuate, it can always bounce back and become better. So, for instance, we came out of the Great Depression, our economy's improved since then. We've come out of the 2009 housing collapse. The economy can always get better. It's reversible, but climate change is irreversible because it causes permanent destruction of our world. So yeah, this was basically just an example as to how you can apply these 5 weighing standards in weighing between different impacts. And yeah, that basically is it for an introduction to weighing. Be sure to apply these methods in your debates, and you'll find greater success.